We will all surely agree that it is very important to be a productive member of society. So important that when Avraham Avinu was looking for a land for his children, he wanted a place where the people had a strong work ethic. But what exactly does it mean to be productive? In Shaychus to the Haftocha von Eibishn to Avram, in regards to Hashem's promise to Avraham Avinu, which was Lezaracha etenes haaretz hazois, I will give your descendants this land, meaning Eretz Yisrael. Zoktir Medrash is a really interesting Medrash which says, when Avraham Avinu walked around Aram Naharaim and other surrounding areas around nearby Eretz Yisrael, he saw that everybody was, as the expression goes, eating, drinking, and being merry. Omar, so he said, I really hope that I will not land up with a portion in such a land. But when he came to the edge of Tyre, the north of Eretz Yisrael, he saw that they were involved with productivity, they were weeding, they were planting. He said, I'll be in a place where they're pruning and weeding and looking after their products. Says the Medrash, that was the Eibishter's response to say, I'm going to give you this land that you have asked for. The fact that the Medrash links the Eibishter's promise of this land to Avram and his descendants, meet them was the Ratzon from Avram Avinu, to the fact that Avram Avinu had a particular wish. I wish to have a portion in this land, which is given to this askus bimlocha von the Yoshvei haaretz, which means that the Medrash is linking the promise of Eretz Yisrael to the fact that Avram Avinu was impressed by the work ethic of the people who were currently living there. As davon verstandig we can understand, as the Meile von Zeris askus bimlocha is given this siba, that implies that their work ethic was the cause, the reason. Not Avram's Ratzon zu der Land. Not only was it the reason why Avram Avinu wanted that land, but also the cause and reason why the Eibishter decided to allocate that land to Avram Avinu and to his descendants. Which immediately should raise a very powerful question. Stellt sich der Shaila. Das, was Avram Avinu hat gesagt, the fact that Avram said, from his perspective, Halavai hei chelki ba'aretz hazois, Halavai, I should have a portion in this land, hat das sich den Pirish, soll haben dort a chelik zwischen die andere Teishavim. That implies that Avram Avinu was happy to have a piece of the land in and amongst the other people who were living there, weil die Yoshvei haaretz seinen sich eisig b'melacha, because they're productive people, so it's a good place to live. Here's move on. That makes sense. Avram hat gewollt wohnen zwischen Menschen, was für sich beanaga harauya, because that implies that Avram Avinu wanted to live in a society that was a productive, which is an appropriate society. Und nicht zwischen azach v'seichen v'sheisim v'poichazim. And he didn't want to live amongst people who were big party people. That makes sense. That makes perfect sense. Avram Avinu wants to live in a healthy society. But the Eibishter's promise, I'm going to give your descendants this land, meint doch, which means, as haaretz hazois vet the Eibishter in ganzen weggeben zu ihnen allein. That means that the Eibishter is going to actually rid the land of those people who have the good work ethic and give the entire land only to Avram Avinu's descendants durch Yerusha unser Kibush, to be their inheritance that they would earn through conquest. Is me'ez at times al di haftocha sein verbunden mit der Anogateva von the Yoshvei haaretz. So if that's the case, if logically those people are going to be removed, why would their conduct be a cause for the Eibishter giving that land without those people to Avram Avinu's descendants? And especially when you consider that why would the way things were in one generation, Avram Avinu's generation, have an influence over how this place should be and why it's given to the Yidden in perpetuity? Now, the simplest way to answer it would be because we know that populations behave in a particular way because of the environmental elements of where they live. So maybe that's the answer. Perhaps we could have answered as the Anhoga from the Yoshvei haaretz, the fact that the people living there behaved in a productive way. That is an indicator that the environment and atmosphere of this part of geography, it helps. It pushes people to work and to be responsible. Like the Medrash says, that there's certain lands that produce powerful people and other lands that produce weaker people. So maybe that's the answer. But let's remind ourselves who was living there. We really need to understand what's going on over here, because Chazal Zogen, as we well know what Chazal tell us, that the people living in Canaan were the most corrupt and immoral of everybody in the region. And the place that was allocated, that was established for the Jewish people, was the most corrupt of the entire corrupt Canaanite regions. So now let's try and understand if the Canaanim's behavior was the most corrupt and immoral, even more corrupt than the people of Aram Naharaim, who are the big partiers. Like you possibly say, that just the one accolade that we can give them, that they had a good work ethic, which would imply that there's only one good element to the atmospheric conditions of that part of the world. So that's going to outweigh all of the other concerns about their terrible behavior. And this will become the saving grace about why this is a land for Yidden. Doesn't seem to make any sense at all. Okay, so in order to answer this question, why don't we ask a broader question? What's so great about productivity or about work? There's a Gemara Sanhedrin that tells us about the value of work. Rabbi Lozer, Kol Adam le'amal nivra. People were created to work. Shenem, as the pasuk says, Ki Adam le'amal yivaled. That the reason that humans were produced was in order to work. So there's a value. Humans were produced in order to work. Now the question is, what defines work or productivity? So then he continues, Eina yodea. I don't know if people were created for the work of their hands, labor, or for the work of speech. When it says in Mishlei, ki ochafal of pihu, that the person who is working, that's the first part of the pasuk, I will compel or override his mouth. That implies that the work we're talking about over here, Adam la'amal yuvaled, that we were created to be productive, actually means to be productive through speech. And then, I still don't know. When it speaks about the work of your mouth, does that mean learning Torah, or does it mean conversation? So therefore, in the pasuk tells us in Yeshua, that the Torah should never leave your mouth. We then realize that humans were created, or specifically we were created, in order to do the work of Torah learning. So now he's not moving. Now this teaching of Rabbi Lozer doesn't really seem to make sense. How could anybody think, as Brias Adam is given Lamal Melocha, that the reason to create people is that people should labor physically? Who would imagine that working is such a big deal, that it's worth being created for it? It's a necessary component of life in order to be productive. Does it make sense? Is it correct to say that would be the reason for the entire creation of a human being? Doesn't make sense. Why is it even a suggestion? The truth is, the second suggestion is just as perplexing. Are you saying that the reason humans were created was to be able to talk? Do you know how much damage we do with talking? The Rambam says in great detail in his Pirush HaMishnayos, that most conversation is inappropriate. So how does the Gemara even go down this route to say, I don't know, maybe the reason we were created was to work or to speak? Noch gresser is ditmia. The question is much stronger when you consider what we well know as in Torah is Torah. That even a suggested perspective within Torah has the validity of Torah. As we see, for example, as when einer lernt a kasha in Torah, Here's a simple halacha. Let's say that a person learns something that is proposed in Torah either as a suggestion or even as a question, on them tirutz maskana, and the person learns it without getting to the conclusion or the answer. Before that, the person would have to say the brachas over the Torah because it is considered Torah learning. So therefore, these suggestions that amal melocha might be the purpose of human creation or amal sicha, they are valid. Beyond that, in the bracha zokter, when a person says a bracha of learning Torah, he says, "On riftas on Torah soy." You call it Eibish's Torah. Torah's emes, the Torah of truth. They'll say, in the kasha kosal kadaitach v'chule, that illustrates that within the question or within the suggested perspective is doa pratus for amitis. There's something that is absolute truth. Now, doa is in itzuge pas v'chayotze, but it's probably not suited to practical halacha. So Derech says, moving binyanenu, let's apply this to our story. The teichen hamayle, vos is do in amal meloch and amal sicha. Whatever advantage there might be to physical labor or to the work of proper conversation, that is so important that we may even suggest it could be the reason we were created. Even when the Gemara reaches the conclusion that the ultimate purpose is the work of learning Torah, the toil of Torah, it does not preclude or reject the other two suggestions. The conclusion of the Gemara implies that it's just that physical work or conversational work is not the full reason and motivation for creation. In under Averta, let's say it differently. The Seder Hoinyonim for the Shakratarian Gemara, the way that this Gemara was presented, first to suggest maybe we were created in order to work. And then then we say no, the truth is we were probably created for the value of our speech. And then eventually concluding that we were really created for the value of our toil in Torah, based on the pasuk Yomush Sefer Torah that we should never abandon Torah. His remains valid. All three steps are valid. In other words, in order for a person to reach their goal in life, that we were created to toil in Torah, as we're going to see, to attain the full value of toiling in Torah, the person first has to have mastered physical labor and conversational work. And then when the person is able to take those two areas of work and link them to the work associated with Torah, then the person reaches his or her purpose. Now, why is that and how does it work? We'll first have to explain in was versteht dich Shivus von Omel Bichlal, why is productivity considered a value in Judaism? Bees, as der Mitzvah verbunden, closely Tachlis from Brias Adam la'Omel Yivoled, and why is it such a value to the extent that we're saying that's why we were created, in order to be productive? Because if you think about it, the Eibishter is the good within goodness, the ultimate goodness. And the nature of all good is to be good to others. Why did the Eibishter have to create the world and the nature of the world in such a way as the mental that we always have to work so hard, that there's always so much stress, that there's always so much exertion? Why? The Eibishter is so good, he could have just laid it on for us on a platter. Now, the automatic knee-jerk response that everybody's going to say is, yes, but we wouldn't feel fulfilled. You can't say, as das der Fall, was ein Mensch betivo hat teining beiker von einer Sache, was bekommt durch sein Horvanya. You can't say, well, the reason is because that's the nature of people. We feel a tremendous sense of achievement and fulfillment when we've actually invested effort of our own. And the Eibishter loves us, so therefore he wants us to feel that sense of achievement. Which would be similar to what the Gemara famously says, that that a person would rather have a much smaller portion that they had achieved of their own accord than a much larger portion that was given to them by others. 9 times as much. That's not a good enough answer for a very obvious reason. There is nothing independently, objectively, that determines that this has to be nature of the human being. Rather, no, the Eibishter as I might be a given mention. The Eibishter wired and designed us to feel satisfaction from effort and achievement. Here's Haja Kushaladuchta, then our question comes to back in full force. Why did the Eibishter design us that we only appreciate the things that are difficult to achieve? Why could he not have designed us in such a way that we get freebies and it makes us feel good? And the answer to that is that birindem amitis v'tachlis hatoiv is the ultimate goodness, is not a measure of result. As the mental de greichen is that a person should achieve nit not the erste shlemus was is do in geder hanivroim. The ultimate goodness is not that a human reaches the pinnacle of what humans could achieve. The ultimate goodness is to invite humans to achieve something that makes them like the Creator, beyond themselves. L'shein Chazal has the famous expression in Gemara in Shabbos, "Shutef lakadosh baruch hu b'ma'aseh bereishis." The ultimate is that we should become the Eibishter's partners in creation, not limited to the human experience. How do you get there? Therefore, in order to facilitate this, the Eibishter designed the entire nature of creation. As the mentions that humans, unlike the animal kingdom, don't just get what they need delivered, but through tremendous exertion. That invites and allows us to lift ourselves, not only to be the ultimate recipients of divine kindness, the ultimate created being, but rather that we become people that innovate, create, contribute what wasn't already there, which makes us like our Creator. And the only way to get there is human endeavor through human faculties. So the Eibishter invites us to become God-like, Creator-like, make things in the world. How? Through work, through effort. Don't just be a recipient, a passive recipient. And das Gufa is the time of the Teva Hanal. That's why the Eibishter created us with such a nature. As I mentioned, that we'll never be fully satisfied from things that are given to us freely. Now, in fact, it actually makes us feel uncomfortable and embarrassed to get handouts. Nama de Chisufa, as it's called, the bread of shame. Tafkid and Shleimus is, it's built into our DNA that our purpose is, our purpose in life is not to be a taker, but a generator, creator, innovator, sharer, giver, like Hashem. Beautiful insight, right? Why is it tough for us to achieve things? So that we can truly achieve and contribute, so we can be God-like. Now you can understand how the Gemara could make the first suggestion as the Adam is that it would be worth creating people just to work in the physical sense. Because as we've identified, the value of productivity is that it will elevate the human to become a contributor to existence, a creator of new things like Hashem, as Shutef lakadosh baruch hu b'ma'aseh bereishis, the Eibishter's partner in creation. So if that's what work, productivity does, then it would make sense that if we're supposed to contribute to the world, where would you see the value of our contribution? You won't see it in our world, the human experience. You'd specifically see it in areas where we touch the world. Where we touch the inanimate, the plant, or the animal kingdoms. And how is that? That will make us into Hashem's partner. How do you do that? Work. Physical work. That's what the Gemara says. Amal Melocha would be a good enough reason to exist. Because that allows you to become creator-like. And therefore is the erste Kasalkadeitach von Gemara. Therefore, the first suggestion is, as Adam la'omal, you've already meant that when the Torah tells us that humans were created in order to be productive, that means nita mal sicha dar mal Torah. It's not talking about conversation and certainly not about Torah learning. But saying it is nit in Welt Sachen, because that has no real connection to the physical, tangible world. Naras meint amal melocha. Must be talking about physical labor. Das heißt, durch dem, was der Adam ist, amal bimlachtoi. In other words, when the person actually exerts themselves in physical activities, in an even arotzi al pi Torah, in a way that is appropriate as mandated by Torah. Was das der Pirush von amal melocha ukdir kamon siv zayin? That's the kind of amal melocha we're talking about, not just freely going out and working within the parameters and guidelines of Torah. That impacts the world, that the world should be as it was intended. If you can make the world as Hashem intended it, you're Hashem's partner in creation. That's level 1 of the Gemara's teaching. To work in the physical world as guided by the Torah is God-like. It's worth being created just for that. But once you examine exactly that information, that the goal of working in the physical world is to upgrade us to become divine partners in creation. Well, when you understand that the whole goal is to become the Eibishter's partner in creation, surely that cannot be achieved only through physical activity. No, you also have to have something that's going to bridge you and elevate you and connect you to Hashem, which is the world of Sicha. Now, Sicha is not simply conversation. As we said, what you need is to be creator-like. That's what makes you a partner in creation. So what's the first step of being creator-like? Creating, innovating, contributing. Okay, check, we've done that. Amal melocha. But how does the Eibishter create? The Eibishter doesn't just pump energy into an existing framework of creation, nor as mechadesh debriya. Rather, the Eibishter renews the whole creative process at every nanosecond. Is move on. Now we can then understand if we want to have a real, complete partnership with Hashem as part of the creative process. We can only do that if we're adding something brand new into the created reality that was not there before. Therefore, working within the physical world, albeit lifting the physical world to a higher state, is actually not enough. Of course, if we work in a way that is mandated by and according to the guidelines of Torah, we will be elevating the world. But as long as our activities are only limited to the physical reality, we don't yet show the unique distinction of being human. Physical actions, animals do those too. So as long as my impact on the world and elevating the world is only through physical actions, then I can only touch the part of the world that is relevant, or I can only bring into the world something that's relative to the world's existence. But I can't bring something into the world that's completely off the charts, beyond anything the world could imagine. I can't bring something new into the world. But when a person engages through speaking, which means, firstly, that's a uniquely human trait. As die Melochun Ashpo in Welt is in an Eufen, was in drückt sich aus dem Meile von Min HaMedaber, Pe v'Sicha. That means now I'm talking. Now I'm using a faculty that is absolutely uniquely human, and therefore illustrates that I'm a human who is in a completely different category, greater than any other living organism. Then I can start to bring something new to the story. I can elevate the world in a whole different way. Can elevate the world in a way that is completely beyond what all of the parameters of creation might have been able to handle. something that is as a result of the fact that we're here. Humans are here. We're going to impact the world in a completely different way. And so, okay, how do we do that? The Rebbe is going to explain a little bit later exactly what Amal Sicha means. It's not just simply talking. But if I really want to be the Eibishter's partner, even speech alone is not going to make me the Eibishter's partner. It will elevate the world in a completely different way when I know what I'm supposed to do with my speech. But I'm not yet the Eibishter's partner fully. Why? Hat nicht kein Chelek in sein Beschaffung bechlal und von sein Keach Adibur befrat. So what happens? I'm working in the world, and I'm speaking, but I haven't yet connected with the Eibishter himself. Whereas the moment I connect my avodah to Torah, Torah is no longer about me. My physical work, that's me. My speaking, that's me. Torah is not me. Was ist Torah von dem Beire? It's the Eibishter's Torah. As we know very well from the Rambam, and after Rebbe brings in Tanya, the Eibishter and his wisdom, which is Torah, are absolutely one. And I'm not just reading Torah, I'm toiling in Torah, invested in Torah. When a person truly invests in Torah, the Torah becomes theirs. The Torah belongs to the person who invested so much effort. By learning Torah with such focus and investment, actually bring creator and creation into one reality. I'm the creation, becoming one with Hashem, the creator, through his Torah. Then you could say the person is like the creator. Then you could say the person is a true partner of Hashem in the creative process. Let's understand this deeper. In the meaning for Amal Meloch and Amal Sicha, in distinguishing between these two concepts, the work that we do in the world and the work that we do through speech, so there's a mimer from the Friedrich Rebbe where he explains as Amal Meloch that the work, the physical work we're describing is not just that you work 9 to 5 or you're completely dedicated to your job, but it's that you do work with absolute trust in Hashem according to the way that the Torah wants. Be'emunah, it means sheyamin b'Hashem, that you trust the Eibishter, she'hazonu mefarnes, that the Eibishter is the provider, v'hu yisbarech yigmar b'adoi livracha, and the Eibishter will help your actions to produce the bracha that you need. Then the Friedrich Rebbe explains, and the inyan von Amal Sicha is, what does it mean to work through speech? That's hisaskus b'tfila. That's the daven. Ch'maimer azal ein sicha elo tfila. As the Gemara Brachas tells us, the word sicha, when it's used in Tanakh, refers to davening. So in other words, it's not just simply working or speaking. It's serving Hashem through our work with absolute faith and davening. There has been the Yosef and the Baim de Montenbier. Let's explain this a little clearer. As Amal Meloch is an inyan was is berech to debria, and Amal Sich is hecha von debria. So what did we say before? In the previous statement we said, before we got to the Friedrich Rebbe's Maimer, we said that Amal Melocha means that you're still working very much within the reality of the world, and Amal Sicha is already taking a step above the world. Let's link that to what we've just learned. When a person works, goes to their job with absolute consciousness and awareness and complete faith that the Eibishter is the provider, not me, the great expert entrepreneur. As powerful as that is, it doesn't yet elevate the person or their work experience into a realm beyond the worldly realm. The very fact that the person goes to work, pays their taxes, markets the product, tells us that they're still living inside the parameters and restraints of the physical reality. Und for which reason, Hagam sein Amal Melocha is durch mit Emunah b'Hashem shehu zonu mefarnes, that even though this person has incredible emunah that totally colors their experience of work, that they know that the Eibishter is the provider. Und niti darkei hateva mitzad atzmam, and they know it's not the stock market or economic cycles or the brilliant marketing that we've used. Von deswegen der Gerechte durch den bloßen Madregen Elikus, was ist meluvischen Welt, yet the net result of that kind of an approach will still keep a person only connected to the dimension of godliness that can manifest and be experienced in the physical reality. But when you daven, you step out of the physical reality. When a person really works on their davening is in yona. What's davening? It's like Yaakov's dream. It's like a ladder that taka starts very much in the physical reality, and then allows you to ascend completely into the heavens. The concept of davening is to lift a person beyond themselves, all the way into a heavenly, spiritual, holy realm, which is completely beyond the natural order. So therefore, when you put the two together, Amal Malacha, the person is working in their business with the appropriate emunah, and you put that together with the experience of davening, that catapults the entire reality of the physical world completely beyond itself. But that's the real translation of climbing the ladder from heaven, from earth to heaven. As durch Tefillah, that when a person davens as they should, not only do they lift themselves because they're davening, but whatever physical, material, mundane experiences that person engaged with the previous day, the previous week, whatever it was, the artza also comes up the ladder, bis zu Shamayma, till it reaches a heavenly state. So the Bechina was is Hecha von Welt, till it reaches a point that is completely beyond the world. So davening totally reinvents our entire experience out there in the world, which is amazing. Now, and we've just described now the incredible impact of davening not only on us, but on our world. Yet in spite of that, even though it's even though it affects the world in such a way that's completely beyond the world, even that cannot revolutionize creation completely. Because davening, yes, it is this incredible elevation of the person and his world, but it is driven by the human. The person works on his avodas tefillah. And even the greatest human on earth is still a human with limitations. So therefore, yes, the elevation is to go beyond the natural order, but it still has its limits. Und der Rebbe wird durch den Aufgetan in Welt nur was ist noch als Berech HaBriah. So even the impact on the world, which gets taken for the ride and gets completely reconstituted because of my davening, it's also only to the extent that the world can stretch itself. But nothing fundamental changes or is introduced. The only time you can bring something new into a scenario is when you step out of the entire infrastructure of the scenario. And therefore the Gemara's conclusion is, why were we really created? Where's the real power? In the toil of Torah learning. Because even when Torah manifests in terms that we could relate to, physical terms, using physical examples, it's the Eibishter's Torah. It has no limits, has no restrictions. And because Torah is completely beyond the reality of creation, so therefore it can impact the world in such a way that the world changes fundamentally to the extent that it could actually become a brand new world that doesn't even look anything like the world before. But that doesn't just happen overnight. There are steps that a person has to go through. In order for a person to successfully, through their Torah learning, totally reconstitute the world to a reality that is beyond anything the world could have imagined, a brand new reality. That's why you can't get there until you've actually worked to refine the world as the world is. Before you extract the world from its reality and plug it into something higher, you actually have to first work with the world. On the Rebbezdem say that's why the Gemara gives us all three possibilities, because you start with an appropriate approach to work. To engage in the business environment, the productivity of the world, as mandated and guided by Torah. Was durch dem ist im Attack in die Welt, sie soll sein ein Azir von Kedusha. That helps to shift the world that it should be in a susceptible place to be able to receive and experience holiness. Aber Amal Melocha allein ist nicht maspik, but you can't stop there. Die Kavone is, as Elam soll nicht bleiben bei meinem Modum Atzovei. The intention for creation is not that the world should remain as the world is, even if it's upgraded, improved, elevated, refined. What is the purpose? Even if the world gets to be a holy place, but still in the structures of a world, we have to add another layer, the effort and impact of speech. Which means, that means to elevate the world beyond the world. Sounds weird to say it. And of course, only to the extent that we are capable of doing, as davening represents. I put in as much effort as I can put in to elevate myself through davening. And that, after you've had those introductory steps, for Amal Melocha, to work in the world with the proper emunah, Amal Sicha, and real meaningful davening, then kommt der Inyan von Amal Teira, was hatten sich dem Koyach, that's what brings a person to the true work within Torah, which contains the potential Zaindik Mushus in Atzmus Yisbarach, because it is rooted in Hashem's essence, to ufton achidish and debria, to completely recalibrate, reconstitute the world, was durch dem wird durchgeführt, the Kavonas Habria, and that will fulfill the purpose and intention of creation. Von Lasses Yisbarach Dira B'Sachtoinim, to make Hashem's home out of the lower realms. As the Tachtonim verena metzias chadasha mamish. That what was Tachtonim, what was the lowest, most spiritually dense, spiritually inept reality, should suddenly become the home for Hashem Himself. The mitzvahs move on. From that we can understand as dafke de metzius and the seder von alle drei sugya omal. That's specifically when you have all three components: Amal Melocha, Amal Sicha, and Amal Teira. Is masbir umatim the meaning from Adam le'omel yuvolet. All of those three together help us understand what the Torah means when it says humans were created to be productive, or more particularly le'omel, for hard labor. Only when you have all three components does a person completely reconstitute the creation. Which allows the person to be Hashem's partner in creation, similar to the Creator. The Eibush created out of nothing, and we're creating a brand new reality. And thus the Tachlis Abriya. And that is the purpose of creation. So, as we've discussed so far, in terms of humans, as the tachlis von seinem Bria is übermachen Welt durch Amal Torah, that the ultimate reason humans, and specifically Jewish humans, were created was in order to totally change the world through the effort of Torah, was is Hecha von der Bria, because Torah is fundamentally beyond the creation. Aber das aufzutan muss früher sein die Akdame von Amal Melocha und Amal Sicha, and of course it has to have the preceding steps. First you've got to work within the world, and then elevate yourself beyond the world, and then get in touch with Hashem as He is, obviously Bein Aroich, totally beyond the world. So the same concept plays out in the geographical location called Israel. Eretz Yisrael is free gegeben geworden zu design Ummas. Initially, Eretz Yisrael was given to 7 other nations. Why? Mit der Kavona und Tachlis, for a particular purpose. As in soll ihr Köber sein und Ibrahim machen, that eventually the Jews would come, conquer them, and transform the space. Von Eretz HaGoyim, so werden Eretz Yisrael an Eretz HaKodesh. To take a land of pagan nations and turn it into Eretz Yisrael, a holy land. A land was in Eretz Meir begiddet de Eira HaTorah was Hecha von Welt. To turn it into a land where the light and energy of Torah would be freely available and accessible. And that journey began in the time of Avram Avinu. Was dann ist gewesen der Schola von Shnei Alofim Torah, because Avram Avinu launched the 2 millennia that would lead to the giving of the Torah. On Avram Yisrael lehoir, and to use the expression of the Medrash, Avram Avinu began to radiate light in the world. He began to illuminate the world with a godly light that is completely beyond the world. And how did Avram Avinu begin his journey? He began by contemplating certain concepts. As we know very well, it's brought in the Gemara, it's brought in the Rambam. His bonus kid the boy omol varum lo yagaito matzos al tamin. When we talk about his bonus, we're not talking about just thinking about something for 5 minutes and moving on. Deep contemplation, where a person could say, "I really invested the effort and therefore I achieved." So what did he contemplate in Debira? Welt, the nature of this world that we live in. Then after that he started to think in Shemesh v'chulei. Started to think about the celestial beings which are beyond the physical world. Who runs them? Durch welches kommt Shefa v'chulei. How do they generate different types of influence over the world? In Welt, until eventually his intellectual process reached the point where he said there obviously has to be a controller. Not only is there a controller, but the controller, the creator, is totally and infinitely beyond the creation. As the expression goes, the whole purpose of godliness is not creation. So Avraham Avinu worked in stages. As there is also indicated some Torah from Avram, and so now in order for Eretz Yisrael to be able to absorb this great achievement and insight and Torah and light that Avraham Avinu was going to introduce, was his Hecher von Welt, which, as we've seen, Avraham Avinu reached a point where his understanding and therefore the light he was going to share was completely beyond the reality of the world. This influence would totally flip and transform the land from a pagan land into the holy land of Israel. Also had to be in stages. The first had to be a time where there was just work, productivity in the land, and then it got upgraded, and they got upgraded further. On the Rebbe, that's why. Therefore, when Avraham Avinu saw that the inhabitants of the land were involved in weeding, pruning, looking after the land, which showed that they had the value of productivity, is given the Avraham Avinu was able to identify, first step is already in process. And therefore, as nach der Akdom for the Bakoshes of Tfilas Avraham Sicha, then Avraham Avinu introduces Amal Sicha by davening and requesting of the Eibishter, Halavai Echel Kiberet Azais. Halavai, this should be my place. Through that, Zol de Eretz gegeben werden zu Avraham Nazare Achrav. That caused the Eibishter to say, now we can give you this land for you and all your generations. Was sie haben es mahafech event zu seinen Eretz, in welchen es leicht der Eure hat Teiro, was ist Hecha von der Bria, because those people, the descendants of Avraham Avinu, they are the ones who would have the power and the capacity to take this land that once upon a time just had practical productivity, and then was upgraded to Avraham Avinu through Tefillah, to eventually become a place that completely illustrates and radiates the Eibishter's light as it was intended to be.